and then smack. And you're like, holy cow, what happened? What happened? Hey, it's Chris. What are you talking about today? They sent me the prototype of Waste of Parts from Sky Kingdom Games, the makers of Isofarian Guard, right? So pedigree's there. Now, what you're doing is you're moving your Sandcrawler-esque style vehicle, Mad Max-esque, through the post-apocalyptic wasteland, gathering up salvage materials to fend off the, well, creatures that are trying to slow you down, stop you, and destroy you along the way. Get far enough and you win if you can last long enough in the first place. This is a hard cooperative board game. Ooh, you know those are some nice words for me. You ready? You want to find out whether or not this is right for you? Let's go. It's not bring me your tired, bring me your poor, bring me your huddled masses. It's Liege of Games. Bring me your hard cooperative games. And truth be told, at the beginning of this video, this is one of the most fun cooperative games with a difficulty curve I was not expecting of all of 2024. This might be my favorite or one of my favorite crowdfunding games, prototype-wise, that I played all year long, period. And it's going to be a little bit divisive when I say that, because I think the value perception is not quite where people want on the crowdfunding page, but we'll talk about that separate. What I'm really talking about is the mechanics of why I think this game should be on your radar, and I'm going to call my shot right now. This is going to be a very, very well-received game when it delivers in 2025, period. You heard it here first, right? So, what are you doing in this game? You have a 12-room board system set up here. If I move a few of these things out of the way so you can kind of make sure you can see all the areas, where you are upgrading through the use of cards, your rooms, and fending off in the form of acrylic standees. Team standee! Aliens, monsters, creatures, whatever from the lagoon that you want to call that is this wasteland, that are really just basically attacking you, causing things to burst onto fire, as you can see here, and slowing you down enough so that you just eventually get overwhelmed. And that's the core of this game. Truth be told, I really fear nowadays depth of rule books bringing minutia, errata, and complexity when 5 pages will do, but 12 pages is what you have. And opening this box of this prototype and seeing that it's really just standees and cards, I was like, oh, huh? Okay. The dynamics that they have been able to introduce with this game make it a very, very engaging yin and yang of almost more Ghost Stories Last Bastion style, if you will, in terms of the difficulty, where the absurdity of it is it's so simple and so straightforward, and yet it's so difficult to keep in check. You know, it's got your pandemic-esque putting out fires, the actual fires on your machine here, but the actual dynamic is really just based in your 2 decks, your enemies and your salvage here. But what do you actually need to know game-wise before I start gushing any further? So, like I said, you have this crawler in front of you. If I move off some of these cards here, you can see that it's just made up of 12 rooms. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Actually, 13 down here is the wastelands. And then you have your decks at the bottom, your enemy decks, your salvage deck, and then you are trying to speed through the desert in order to reach 35 clicks or 35 turns on this tracker here. This tracker tells you how far you are along, what noise you're making, and then also what the whole integrity is still, your life, essentially. Because as you take damage, the amount of things that are fired takes damage to your machine. And if you can get all the way around this to the 35th marker, you win. And along the way, you will be getting more obstacles and hurdles as you're sort of slowly progressing. So on a turn-by-turn, round-by-round basis, what you're doing is you're populating the enemies from this enemy deck based on the number of the noise that your machine is creating. And you keep track of it simultaneously over here. And the main aspects of that are your engines, which are going to be right here, which automatically give you a certain amount of noise. And then also the cards in the rooms that are also going to contribute noise as you upgrade as well. As you can see here, a 0 for the Deadeye cannon, but the waste stirrer crane gives me an additional noise. And so that is how many cards you take off the top of the enemy deck to populate in a round by round basis. And as this scenario was set up, I was actually pulling 7 cards and having to deal with them. And some of them are, in this case, just the wind. Discard it with no effect, and then the rest of them are monsters of varying degrees. And these monsters are as follows. This is the health that they have, this is the damage they'll do, and this is the area they start in. 13, as I mentioned, means they start in the wastelands. Why that's important is we'll talk about in a second, but then some of them will have special abilities, and then also they will start in other areas 1 through 12. Then up in the upper right hand corner, you'll see that there are tiers 1, 2, and 3. And so as you're going along these markers, as you progress throughout the desert, after you hit a level 10 here, you then integrate, shuffling in all of the level 2s. You get into 20, you shuffle in all the level 3s. And so the biggest thing I have to say with the integration of those enemies is, holy difficulty curve, Batman. That is where things go in the first couple rounds, where you've got like 3 or 4 of these little monsters you're taking out in these rooms, and you're like, hum, this game's really easy. I'm really kicking some butt. I have a bunch of rooms upgraded. Let's make a bunch of noise and get a bunch of cool stuff. And then smack! And you're like, holy cow! What happened? What happened? All of a sudden, my sniper rifle, my climbing gear, and my weapons are no longer as effective as I thought they'd be. And that's the balancing act, because certain of these rooms you're going to have to be managing as you go along, right? You've got your engines on your bottom that have to be operational for you to move. You get to move certain spaces based on how fast your engines are going. You can feed them fuel as an action to get them further on a turn-by-turn basis. Otherwise, you only may move 2 spaces. So, again, the tower defense-esque reverse style, where 2 doesn't sound bad until you realize that if you don't take out every single guy, if you only take out 3 of the 4, after 3 or 4 turns, there's a lot of people left over that are smothering you. Then you have your cannons down here at the end, which fire down at the wasteland. Because if you have any creatures in that 13 area that I mentioned, the wasteland area, you don't move. They're blocking you. And apparently you just can't Mad Max run them over. But anyway, right? You have back here the crane, you have the forward cockpit, and then you have sort of the upper entry areas up here, and then you have the catch-all rooms here in the middle. And the catch-all rooms are basically, you can put almost anything in there. The other ones have very specific ones that can only go in some of these sections. You can't just put an engine room up here or anything else along those lines. So then the other thing I have to mention, though, is that when you have these cards and you've got the dark coloring of the room and you've got the dark coloring of the cards, you're looking at this symbol to see which one it goes in, and it's not that bad, but as you can see, it's kind of hard to tell which one's behind the number there. And so when you're first learning this, it's kind of hard to tell. And so that is similar to like when you've got them over and you can't really tell what it is. So again, I'm assuming some of that will be straightened out post-production. And here, just let me show you a little bit of craziness of these rooms so you can get a sense of what there's actually going on. Enemies cannot leave containment cell. Ignore the first enemy attack each round. Scrap this room upgrade after firing once. You roll 10 dice on the torpedo. Strange chamber. A crew member in this room may take 1 damage. If they do, deal damage to enemy inside the mech anywhere else. Grab cannon. Each time this weapon's fired, reduce the mech speed by 1 to a minimum of 0, but you get to roll, what is that, 7 dice? Deadeye cannon, you just get 5 dice. Upgraded artillery, we talked about that already. Similar. Dredger crane, again, it just gives you more cards you get to draw on the salvage at the back end. And then you start to see some of the weapons. The grenade, which you roll 4 dice and you discard it to attack all enemies and crew members. Friendly fire in this or an adjacent room. Sniper rifle, I mentioned earlier, 2 dice. You can fire in an adjacent room, but then because it has the ammo symbol, you actually have to turn it upside down, which requires another action to turn it right side up. And then you have the pistol again, just in the melee version of that. Same room, but you get to roll 2 dice instead of your 1 for unarmed combat. So I just want more craziness, right? So then your turn is based off of your player card here, which I'll pull up for you for a second. And this is what one of your individual player boards actually looks like. And you've got 3 dials for your health, your attack, and your action. And your attack means your unarmed attack. So you're going to have weapons and abilities that you can sort of utilize along the way. Like I mentioned with my sniper rifle here, which actually has an ammo indicator. Your unarmed attack just does whatever that is indicated to. And then your actions, you get 3 per turn for most of these characters, and you just get to do 3 of them and you go. Health meaning 3 damage, and then you die. You can be revived, so that's not a lose condition as well. And each of your characters has 2 slots down here for the equipment that they can handle. Like in this case, I had a climbing gear and a sniper rifle. Sniper rifle allows me then to fire at an enemy in an adjacent room, because otherwise you can only melee attack people who are in your same room normally. And at the bottom of this sniper rifle card, it tells you right there how many dice I'm rolling from that aspect. And so in this game, like I believe 1s and 2s are misses. 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6s are hits, which sounds relatively straightforward. The enemies do the same thing. And so when the enemies are in the same room as you, if I didn't just slip up all those right there as I bumped the table, again, they get to roll a certain amount of dice. But in this case, right, this guy doesn't actually bring any dice to the table, but he immediately summons another creature to the table that you're going to have to deal with, along with him potentially doing the other main thing that these enemies are going to do. And the other main thing that these enemies are going to do is, if they're in a room unattended, then they make one of these rooms not on fire, but they actually make it inoperable. And you put one of these cards down there, and then if they damage it again, then they make it on fire. Inoperable means that all the actions that are normally going on it in the room cards that you have maybe down there in the first place, they're just not functioning. Fire means that you actually lose it altogether, which could be a blessing if you like losing super cool good things that help you, like a rejuvenation station where crew members can heal or get an extra action on a single round if they start there. Yeah, that's freaking sweet. Or you can heal the hull, or you can do all sorts of other cool things. But then if it's on fire, you also just lose it altogether, and you potentially could maybe get a small benefit if it's a super noisy room. But at the same time, if it's really on fire, you're probably going to need that benefit more than you're going to worry about the noise. And so now going back, and I'll have these gears off to the side again, you just start at these values and you keep track of them. At the bottom of this player board, though, you have an ability that you get to choose on a round by round basis of which one you want. And so in this case, this guy's a gambler, right? So press your luck. At the start of my turn, I may roll a die and I get actions to the number rolled -1. So if I roll a 6, I would get 5 actions that turn instead of my 3. But if I roll a 2, I'd only get 1. Right? That's the gambler. Make your own luck. Whenever a die would be rolled for an effect in your room, may substitute the gambler's die for one of those rolls. So all of these characters that I have, 8 characters that I have right here, all have 2 of those abilities. Most of their health and their strengths are otherwise very, very similar. So the majority of it comes from this other massive deck. Because if you have a person at the end of the round in the crane, then you get to pull cards from the crane dependent on what the value of that crane upgrade is. And so all you do is you pull them off the top of your deck and do with them what you can. Upgrade your rooms or put them into the salvage. The salvage is basically this loot all pile that you can use to mitigate later on in terms of also healing the mech as a whole, your big machine, or mitigating and going searching for other things along the lines. You can also use them for fuel as your action during your individual turns. Fuel means that you would supercharge it and go further. Some of these rooms, though, are high risk, high reward. I had a huge cannon. It dropped 12 dice, if I'm remembering correctly. But afterwards, after I did that, I had to roll a die, and on 1 through 3, it burst into flames and I lost it. Guess who rolled a 1 the first time they used that? And, well, I decimated the wastelands, but I caused that thing to go into flames, which eventually led the whole run to just being kaput, because then things overwhelmed me because I was too busy trying to put out the fire as the rest of the guys climbed on board. And that's the thematic incorporation that goes along with this game. It's an overwhelming mass of just getting rushed and trying to fend off rather than to win. And I love that portion of this game. The tricky part is, right, you have this huge also enemy deck. This was, halfway through the game, I had this many cards that, I had already gone through, because again, like on a round by round basis, I'm pulling somewhere between 5 to 7 cards. 10 rounds in, there's a reason you have, this is just an absolute massive deck. I don't think you realize how many cards this actually is, right? This is just massive amounts. And so you need that many. And so some of the campaign is unlocking more enemies. Some of the campaign is unlocking more salvage. We'll talk about that in a second. The thing that's a little bit hard to keep track of, and you have this little sideboard here to do it, is that you've got this sideboard that has the room numbers on them. So you can kind of say, okay, when they move from room to room, where are they? Which ones are which? Because you may end up with 2 or 3 of the same monsters on board at the same time, depending on your card draw. And that's probably the biggest detriment, is this is kind of the only way to do it, and it kind of is okay. At the same time, it does make it difficult, because you can't put the ring that you have color wise for some of the miniatures when you allocate or when you number them when you have got your dungeon crawl scenario. You don't really have that here because of Team Standee. So That's probably the biggest, did I move into the right area? Which one is which one took the damage? That I make sure I'm allocating that from that aspect can really sometimes be the biggest bog down more than anything else, truth be told. That's probably my one big gripe. My second minor gripe, and I know they're working on this production wise, is like I said, with these inoperable cards and these fire cards, they're supposed to be transparent, because the other problem that you run into is with some of these standees, I have them face down, but you can normally have them face up like this, so it doesn't get in the way of reading the card. But right now, if I put these over one of these cards, you just can't read it whatsoever. And so you can't remember, okay, which one was this, or what was the noise value, or even putting them over the area right here, it kind of covers up the number. So you're having to kind of, okay, which one is which? And it's not that bad, but you're just kind of having to remind yourself consistently of that. There's a few other nuances to the rooms I won't go over. Like, for example, 1 and 4, the enemies can't actually damage it, they go in. The other part of things that I didn't talk about was the enemy AI system. It's really simple. It's really straightforward. Are they in a room with a good guy? They attack you. Are they not in a room with a good guy? Then they damage the room. Then they move towards the more sensitive areas if they're in a room that's on fire. The nice thing, and it sounds a little bit weird, is that they all attack simultaneously. So if you have, like, as the rules state, 4 in a room, if I'm getting this correct now, they all just attack simultaneously, and the room goes from completely fine to on fire. So it's not like you have 1 and then 2, that would make it on fire, and then 3 and 4 would leave. So it does mitigate some of that, because otherwise I was like, well, that seems like a really weird rule, but it actually would be completely overwhelming if it didn't do that as well. The difficulty would be off the scales. So just the dynamics of this, I was not expecting, right? Pros and cons. It is really it's a fun game. And the issue, I would say, pro and con wise, is the character powers are not all as timely and useful as I would like. And the asymmetry between the actions and the health is very, very similar. So the character differentiation is not going to be there in that sense, but it's going to be the balancing of sending, you over here and you over there, sort of like a pandemic, where you need to do your job even if you're not asymmetric. I need you at this portion of the ship. I need you at this portion of the ship. That's going to matter more than the actual asymmetric nature of this game. So I don't really think about that either way. And the dynamic of the salvage deck as being as big as this is, I was really worried. Like, am I just going to get screwed? No, there's tons of everything in there. There's tons of rooms. There's more rooms than I was imagining. There's more weapons and gear than I was imagining. So it's actually, which one am I keeping? Because I only have 2 spots to keep them. How am I going to do that? And which ones are important? Because I didn't mention the fact that you only have these little ladders right here. And these are the ways you're going to have to go up. So that climbing gear actually allowed me to go up this way to navigate in ways that I wasn't able to otherwise. But otherwise I would have had to go up and around, because again, 3 actions again includes your move. So it's just a very, very tense situation as a whole. The other aspect is you have to be playing with 3 characters minimum. So if you are playing this as a solo person or as a 2-player, you're going to have to multi-hand it. If you have at least 3 players at all times, each person gets 1, and that's relatively doable. That being said, as someone who plays a lot of these games now multi-handed in order to learn them or in order to teach them, I didn't think it was a problem whatsoever. If you're looking at this as a solo game, this is actually very, very, very manageable. And I can't always say that in a lot of these games, even cooperatively or even competitively as a solo going head to head or a 2-player asymmetric situation. And yeah, the other thing I have to say is this is expensive on crowdfunding. I see the price point at the time of me filming this, and this is along the lines, I would wager, of an Ivy Studios chip theory, right? I've got this plastic little insert for the 3 dials. That's a little bit over deluxified. It's got metal pieces there. Is that necessary? Probably not. And you know what? Acrylic standees. Are acrylic standees better, worse, or about the same as miniatures from your aesthetic portion of things, but also from what you want to pay from that aspect? And then again, the gears and the metal pieces that mark your powers. I mean, this doesn't need to be metal. This doesn't need to be metal, but it is. So you're paying, just like with chip theory, you're paying for the, premium mats and the chips when they could just be the regular stuff. And so again, it's one of those where do you want to spend the money in that regard? So all in all, like, I am actually super, super impressed as a dice chucking, still getting enough mitigation by the sheer value and number of the dice that you're rolling to deal with the enemies that are popping up. And I wasn't actually, again, like I said at the beginning, expecting this to be that hard. I went into this, like I mentioned, playing it and going, oh, this is going to be super straightforward. Oh man, this is going to be. And then it just the dynamics of the rooms and swapping out and trying to decide which ones I want noise for, which are going to give me more powers and more abilities and more damage, which also are going to create more noise. And then, how do I just, that balancing act is it's just so enjoyable. I haven't really had a ton like that recently. And again, it's not from it being super complicated or being super hard to learn or to take all of these things. They're all very straightforward actions that you're going to be utilizing your characters on. It's nothing that you haven't seen before. But to do it in this room swapping style of things, it almost reminds me of like a little bit of Mission Catastrophe from Breaking Games, I believe. And it just is more fun. So that's what I can tell you, right? And I've looked at the crowdfunding page, right? Like I mentioned, it is expensive, but apparently it's not going to retail. It's going to be available on their web shop. So coin flip there, you get it elsewhere on the secondary market, if possible, maybe. And then the other thing that they've added since the campaign started, which, and I feel really excited by random events popping up along the way, like sort of a Quacks of Quedlinburg, if you will, or a Dead of Winter, where you just don't know, and you're going to get some good stuff, you're going to get some bad stuff, but it spices it up just between the rounds enough to make it not monotonous repetition of the grind between each and every single round of spawning, actions, grabbing, mitigating, rinse and repeat, right? There's also a boss mode that you get to the end of the run and you have to fight like some crazy boss. And so I only worry about it from that aspect of if it really takes you that long to get there in the first place, are you going to want to do the boss? But right now, it didn't really take a super long time to play this game, win or lose, right? I lost more than I won. So I don't think I'd have a trouble going up against the boss at that point. It's just, what is that actually going to look like? And so they've outlined just vague ideas and mechanics behind that. But ultimately, here at the end, I have to say that this has been one of the best surprises, unexpectedly much better than I was thinking it was going to be. And so I'm really, really happy I got a chance to play this. So again, I know it's not going to be everyone's. It's going to be too simple on one side of things. It's going to be too expensive on the other side. But as I say on the crowdfunding roundup all the time, like, where do you want your free indie loan to go? And you know what? Things don't get made otherwise on the opposite side of things. So I think this is going to be very much like Isofarian Guard that flew under the radar the first time around. And then, or even more like a Cthulhu Death May Die, if you will, where people were like, oh, that's too simple. That's too easy. Marvel United. What are you talking about? That's just little chibi miniatures and you're just playing a card and going around in a circle. You're just playing a card and going up in between rooms, guys. I'm telling you, it's that good. So there you go. Sky Kingdoms, thank you for sending this to me. Let me know any comments, questions, concerns down below. It's freaking awesome. I'm excited by this one. Stay classy. Peace out.